the dream. Being in a quest pass-through scene, having a text prompt, writing in the text prompt, and then just having a 3D object, and like being able to move that around, do some, I just want to get AI generated 3D into Quest 3, and today that's what we're going to be working on. There's quite a few extra steps along the way that we need to kind of go over. So in order to get this working, we need to create a text to 3D API. We're going to build this API as an Auto111 extension, and that way it can be really useful all around, and we can also really easily tie it in with other APIs. So we have all of our kind of APIs in one place, like the depth maps and all the, it'll just make things very convenient down the line. The main method that we're going to be using is depth map sandwiching method that we had previously been working on, and just flipping out some things and adding in some extra like bells and whistles, and that's going to be like the core of our structure. So this brings us to the Blender scripting component. Most functionality in Blender can be replicated through scripting using BPY library, and it's awesome. If you go to the scripting tag after you've done any sort of functionality in Blender, oftentimes it'll give you what it was doing under the hood, and you can just gather those scripts into another library and just run it in the background. It's pretty amazing. So there's a lot of like little caveats to that, of course. A lot of the context ends up getting really confusing. So like the settings on your menus, a lot of times those end up being in the wrong place and you get a lot of errors. So it is a lot more work that I'm kind of leading on to, but like for the most part, it's really powerful and it allows you to do some really fun things. So that's what we're going to be using to do a lot of the actual 3D building. So we're going to make depth maps, and then we're going to add those to the mesh, then do a union operator, combine them together. We're also going to include some normal maps in there as well, and just kind of bundle it all together using Blender scripting. And it's just, once you can do it once, and then you're just, every time you run it, it does all that little like Blender work for you. So it's amazing. So quick rundown on the extension: you can input an image, and then you get out an output. It takes about a minute to run. One of the key buttons is the doubling, and that just kind of adds the front as the back too, so it just kind of double sides the thing. But you also, using control maps, you actually can get fronts and backs of people pretty reliably now, so it's not necessary to do that. So the API needs to be hosted off of SSL, otherwise it won't be able to be accessed in a WebXR environment. And so in order to do that, we're just going to create some self-signed certificates, and then connect those to like when we start up the server, and that way it'll be able to be read over a local network. So we're just going to be using local network stuff. Eventually I'd like to get this all in Docker, but not for now. So once we have it running on a local network, now we can actually access it from WebXR. So now we get to the quest component. So now we run into the biggest hurdle, and that was getting a text prompt to work in a WebXR scene on Quest 3. And so in particular, this required a little bit of extra work because we needed a 3D canvas. We needed you raycasting to hit the canvas, so that we could open up a hidden text prompt that would this is like ridiculous. So yeah, basically you raycast that causes a click to happen on a hidden text box that's hidden in the HTML. So then when you write, it writes to that text prompt. That information is added back to the canvas. There's this whole loop thing, and then you get this text prompt, and then you also need to update all the textures in the appropriate way. And there's a lot of other kind of like just nitpicky things that I ran into that were really frustrating in terms of canvas resolution and all these other weird little intricacies. But once you get that all settled, then you're just hitting the button, and this causes a set of requests to happen. So first off, we have just a text to image. That gets you an image back. Then you send that image back to the server to get a depth map back. Then you send those two images back to get a 3D object to be built on the server. And then your final request is to get the 3D object that was on the server. So there's 4 different requests, and they all just happen sequentially. And there's probably a better way of doing this. Like, one of the things that I did run into that was a really big limitation is that Auto111 tends to have these locks on the API where it has difficulties requesting an API when it already is running an API. So internal requests, you can't like loop them over, which like makes a lot of sense from a logic perspective. Otherwise you could have these like loops, it's it's a very like, in terms of like asynchronous programming, it makes a lot of sense, but it's just frustrating because it forces you to not be able to like call internal requests. So you need to do some sort of proxy server setup, and you could do that, but that's a lot of work. Like, this is a silly project, so we're gonna do silly things. Interactivity is actually very straightforward. So mostly we are just adding some controllers in, letting those get controlled, and then we are attaching and detaching from those controllers. And that's pretty much all interactivity is. And then for the UI, I did make it so that it is attached to the camera so that it moves around when your face moves around. That actually, that's a design decision that I'm not sure is the right one. So we'll have to think about that a little bit more. So I think this project is pretty firmly in the uncanny valley. So I can understand if it's a little bit uncomfortable, but we have to work our way through the uncanny valley, and hopefully there's something better on the other side. So I had a few different goals in mind with this. I like really would like there to be like some sort of real-time video game aspect. So having runtime objects come in, that would be fun. So a Unity integration maybe, and then also doing some sort of virtual production. So like I think it's really fun to set up a set that's like all AI generated, and then you're in augmented reality, and then you can just kind of film like you normally would. There is definitely like you'd probably need some heavy post-processing. So some like maybe AI can help out with that too. I don't know. But yeah, that's another kind of attachment. But that's all I have for today. Thanks and have a great day.